Good afternoon, everybody. How's everybody doing? Pretty well, pretty well. Good. Thumbs ups. Well, today we are going to build on what we started on last time. Last time was my introduction to philosophy and ethics and all of that lecture. Okay. This time I'm hoping it becomes more of a discussion than a lecture in the sense that we're going to mostly interrogate today the difference between morality and ethics. That's going to kind of be our path moving forward over the coming weeks. The reading that I gave you for today, the Madison reading, I actually have it here right in front of me. My desk is a giant mess. Yeah, here we go. It's from a book called Introducing Moral Theology. It comes from this is from a theological discussion of and theology and ethics. Sometimes, like if you do ethics from the religious standpoint, sometimes the two disciplines intersect somewhat, but they are somewhat different. This book was kind of written more from a theology standpoint. Of course, any theology discussion, you assume certain things, right? Like belief in God and such. But what the reading for today does, it introduces you to this idea from Plato, this thought experiment called the Ring of Gyges. Okay. Basically, the thought experiment behind the Ring of Gyges is this. Imagine that you come across a ring that can make you completely invisible. That's kind of like what the ring in the Lord of the Rings does. I do wonder if Tolkien might have been inspired by this somewhat. But imagine you have a ring that makes you completely invisible. You can kind of apply this to other things as well, right? Think about something like Superman in comic books. Superman's pretty much the all-powerful superhero. He only has one weakness, which is kryptonite. Usually, even when you think about something like Superman, what separates him from a lot of the other comic heroes, for instance, you've never really seen a good Superman video game, for instance. But what separates him is the fact he does have all this power. It's hard. Superman's hard to overcome obstacles. What makes him interesting is how do you use this power responsibly and ethically and morally. That's kind of what the Ring of Gyges example does. So, for example, if you had an invisible ring, would you go into a bank and rob a bank? Nobody would ever know you were there. Assuming your ring could hold a big bag of money or something too, right? If that shrouded that, would you go do that? Would you go spy on people that you know? Would you use it to collect influence or knowledge in some way that you shouldn't? Would you use it to obtain like blackmail information or something so that you could get power in the local community? Think of all the different ways that you could use such a device like that. What the Ring of Gyges example suggests, the Gyges in the parable here pretty much says, okay, at our core, human beings are people who mostly think about themselves. We've all got some self-interest here. So Gyges pretty much says it would be an idiotic if you got such a device not to use it for your own self-gain in some respects. Like, why not use it to become wealthy, or why not use it to gain influence or gain love or whatever you can do? Think about like all the different scenarios you could kind of think of in creating such an example. Gyges says it would be stupid not to do that because the pain that we get from sometimes harming or exploiting others isn't as awful as the pain that we cause ourselves by refraining from such things. That's kind of what the experiment says. And Socrates, and of course, in the example, pretty much critiques that. Right? We should use, if such a power ever came about, we should use it responsibly and ethically. It all comes down to, again, this obligation. This obligation is not the right word. This quandary of sorts. Why do we do what we do? Okay. Do we do it because we have to? Do we do it because other people tell us that we should do it? Whether that be a church, whether that be legal stuff, even within things like academics. Do we follow certain rules just because professors or administrators tell us to? Or do we do it because we realize that following such rules will lead to happiness and productivity and the good life? It all comes down to the point, it doesn't matter what you're doing, even if you're like a rebel, like, I'm not going to listen to this person. Think about like the average like 15-year-old boy, right? I'm not going to listen to this person. I'm going to rebel. Even in such a case, the Madison pretty much makes the case, even in such a case, you're still following a rule. Your rule is, I'm not going to listen to anybody else's rules. So you're still following a rule of some sorts, even if you think you're not. This kind of all boils down to a question: what would you do if you had the ring? Would you use it for some kind of gain? Would you use it? Would you kind of refrain from using it? I'll open that question to you guys. If you had this magic ring that made you invisible, would you be honest? Like, I'm not going to think any less of you if you say, yeah, I would use it for all kinds of crazy stuff, right? I won't judge. Okay, be honest. How might you use such a thing if you had it? Would the temptation to use it for self gain be too much? What do you all think? Somebody chime in.
I'm not afraid to say I'll probably use it.
How would you think of a crazy
this is going to come with a good hit of judgment, but I would definitely turn invisible to hide from my children so I can take a nap. Definitely probably would do that. I would probably be tempted, though, to use it in other scenarios. There's been several instances over the years in the workplace and stuff where it's just, especially as like the supervisor, manager, or something like that, overlooking your staff and just wanting to know what's really happening. That would be probably one of my bigger, to really find out like what's actually going on versus what I'm hearing or being told. Because sometimes you're in that predicament and you're like, okay, well, you want to believe this person, but if that's not really what's happening, like, they shouldn't be faulted for it. So that happens a lot. And I'd probably use it for some sort of reasoning with that.
Right? You could, whether people are following through with their work, or even kind of think about, would you use it for something like hearing gossip or something like that at the workplace? Somebody talking junk about you behind your back and such.
Well, so I ran hotels and oversaw multiple departments on multiple properties, and I don't care. Business is business. It doesn't matter if you're friends or family. I fired one of my best friends. I don't really care. Business is business when you're in that position. So at the end of the day, like, I'm kind of cutthroat in that respect. But yes, I still would like to know sometimes what's going on. And people either love or hate to work with me. There's no in between.
Right.
But yeah, when certain scenarios and circumstances come up, for sure, it would be nice to know what's actually going on. I don't care if they don't like me. That's their problem.
It's a good way to be. What about some of the rest of you guys? How might you use the ring if you had it, or not use it?
Honestly, I don't have kids, but I do have a lot of responsibility watching my brother, and he's 9, so he's a lot. So I understand what she's talking about, hiding from them. Obviously, I know you can rob a bank or whatever, and I know the money would probably be decent, but no, I do think I would probably just hide from my responsibilities for a day.
What would you say? What would you define as your responsibilities that you would use it to hide from? Just work or
Um,
parenting or
I mean everything: school, taking care of my brother, um, looking after the house, everything. Just hide from it all. People
days off aren't really days off, right? So you would use it for a true day off.
Yeah.
But is it ever really that way? Because then the next day you just have more to do.
No, exactly.
Yeah, I did that yesterday. I took a true day off, and now I'm regretting it.
Mm-hmm.
Others of you, would you use it for nefarious purposes?
I would probably use it for gossip at work because I'm nosy. So I think I would use it for that. But I don't think I could do it for like a bank to get money or anything because I think I would feel too bad about it. But definitely for gossip because I'm one nosy person.
Right. It would be fun to get behind the curtain and see what others might be saying, maybe, if you value such things.
It's a fly on the wall sort of situation. And I know there's definitely got to be more people out there that. Thanks for agreeing with me, Savannah.
I'm just nosy. I can't help it.
I'm the same way. I'd love to be a fly on the wall, but then I know if I did know what people were saying, I would have my feelings hurt. You know what I mean? It's one of those things where it's like almost better not knowing.
Ignorance is bliss.
And just trusting your intuition. Because, there's rooms that I walk into where I know where I stand without anybody having to say anything. And kind of having that validation, I feel like for me at least would be too much. I'm just like, man, I'm better off not knowing.
Any of you guys in here a landlord? Maybe I could see. Yeah. Would you use it to, Anna? Would you use it to spy on your tenants? Are they keeping their place up?
I don't think so. I think that over the years of doing such, there's been a few cases where I'm like, I kind of really want to know, but like Mackenzie just said, other times you're like, yeah, you don't really want to know. thankfully I've had pretty decent tenants over the years. When I did it for a business, though, that was more of the like, I'd really rather not know what's on the other side of that door. But that one wasn't personal property. That one was like a corporate one. So it's a little bit of both. It's kind of like when people do like the fortune teller thing and like they know what's going to happen and then they react differently. And so that changes what the outcome could be. Sometimes it's for the better, sometimes it's for the worse. But if they would have just left it unknown, then it could have all worked out fine. Sometimes you just got to let things happen the way they're going to happen.
Yeah, my brain was drawn to that because I sometimes watch those videos on TikTok of the landlord going into a piece of property and seeing how people like completely trash it and all this stuff. It made me think of it in this context.
And that's why you never eat food that somebody makes at their house that you don't know.
Yeah, you don't know where that's been. Yeah, there's a famous piece of literature. If you take me, sometimes I teach it in World Lit 1. I know I'm teaching it in British Lit, which Jacob's taken with me, called Dr. Faustus. And in that story, Dr. Faustus is a scholar who sells his soul to the devil. Okay, the devil's pretty much like, I will give you anything you want for the next 30 years. And then once that 30 years is up, that's it. You're going to hell. You're damned to hell forever. Okay, so you think, okay, what's this guy going to do? How's he going to use this power? How's he going to use this new power? If you read the story, he uses it for all this stupid stuff. Like he plays a prank on the Pope while he's invisible. He plays pranks on these like shepherds off in the woods, like messing with them and stuff. You read the whole thing, and his exploits about what he's doing in that 30 years go by just like that. It's all stupid stuff. There's very little there in terms of gaining honor or wealth or prestige or anything like that. It's all this goofy stuff. And then when he gets to the end, of course, he's like, oh gosh, what did I do? How did I use my time? It's a really weird story. He even summons Helen of Troy close to the end. He summons Helen of Troy so that he can make love with her, the most beautiful woman ever in history. Right? He summons her. Of course, it's not really her. It's like a demon impersonating her, right? But you read the whole thing. My point here is you read that whole thing. He has this power, kind of like the Ring of Gyges. But then he comes up at the end, completely realizes his whole life was empty and meaningless. He sold his soul for what? Playing pranks. So that's kind of the tension point that I'm trying to strike at here with this analogy of the Ring of Gyges. Maybe some of us would use it for these different purposes. Maybe some of us would use it for all kinds of other nefarious things that maybe some of you just didn't want to admit. Okay, yeah. Props to those of you who were honest. Okay, what would we do? How would we use it? Would all these things that it would grant us actually achieve a happiness for us in the good life? For Dr. Faustus, if you read that story, it did not. This is kind of now where we segue over into talking about the obligation versus the happiness way of thinking about morality and ethics. So, how do we think of such things then? The morality of obligation is what Madison calls it in that chapter. that is when you have a certain set of rules and you follow them just for no other reason. Like intentionality becomes important here. What's your intention for following the rule? If your intention for following the rule is, okay, if you followed the rule, maybe everybody will get along, maybe there'll be harmony and no discord. Maybe you fear punishment for following a rule. Like when I come in the first day of class and say, do not use artificial intelligence to generate any of your work. Okay. Maybe most of you would follow that rule just because I told you to. You don't want a consequence to your grade, right? That would be sort of a morality of obligation. You're not doing so because your heart is telling you to do so. You're doing so just because you want to keep the peace. It's your obligation. You owe it to somebody to do so. Think about stuff like a funeral. Lots of times somebody will die. You might think to yourself, I hated that son of a bitch. Okay. Like that happens a lot. Okay. I hated this person. Sometimes that's within your own family. But maybe I'm just talking about myself here. I don't know. My family's pretty annoying. But you go to a funeral, right? Do you go because of an obligation that you feel to your family? Maybe other people would talk smack about you if you don't go. Maybe it would create drama in your family if you didn't go to your. We'll use a racist uncle. Okay, we'll use a racist uncle as an example. This is your racist uncle's funeral. Okay, if you would you go to your racist uncle's funeral just because it's your obligation? That's your uncle. You know, people would talk smack if you didn't and call you disrespectful and all this stuff. No matter what choice you make, of course, that's a moral choice. Contrast this to the morality of happiness. Would you go to the racist uncle's funeral just because you want to, right? You might not have liked the guy, but you still wanted to pay your respects. It would make you happy and at ease to do so. Nobody's pointing a gun at your head and telling you to do it. You nonetheless go just because you feel like it's the right thing to do. Think of other examples. Right? This can apply to almost any moral situation. Do you not go back to the AI example? Would you not use AI to cheat just because you just wouldn't feel right to do it? Like maybe you snuck one by me and you got away with it. Maybe like all of your interactions with me are nice and pleasant. Then you think to yourself, okay, I feel kind of crappy about that now. If you would do it, versus would you just not do it just because it makes you happy not to be a liar and a cheat? The book uses cheating as an example, cheating on a spouse or a significant other or something like that. So maybe if you kind of followed a morality of obligation, you wouldn't do so because maybe you would fear the consequences. Like if a person found out, create all kinds of awful things in my relationship, the relationship might sever. There might be financial consequences. Maybe if you're married, like if you get divorced, you'd have to give up half your stuff. Versus do you not do it because it would completely sort of destroy your conscience to do so.
You don't have any sound.
I don't have sound.
It might just be me. I don't know. Just me? Oh no. Okay. Let me try to figure it out. I don't know. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, sometimes you got to make sure the microphone or whatever, the headphones or the speakers or whatever are coming out the right way. If you look at the chat, you can also sometimes that helps. But where I was going with the cheating thing, this is Madison's example. You not do it just because you love that person you're with. You realize that would completely destroy your conscience, whatever the case might be. Okay, versus if you did it as an obligation, maybe you do so because you realize there would be consequence, or you wouldn't want that done to yourself, so you're not going to do it to someone else. This is kind of the tension point with which we're arriving. This is the difference between morality and ethics. Okay, morality is more along the lines of the obligation aspect, like what are the rules? Why do we do it? But even with the obligation aspect, it's all geared. If you follow these rules, the rules are designed to make you happy in some way. But the intentionality is what matters. Do you follow them just because, or do you follow them because you know that they will lead to some prosperity and happiness? That's kind of where the tension point where we're arriving at. This is something that every human being has to sort of deal with. Where we sort of hit a wall with this idea, though, is this notion: how do we know the rules are right? How do we know they're right rules? How do we know that they will make us happy? Is there, even when it comes to morality and ethics, is there even like a universal set of rules that would make us happy? This is a question that we're going to be dealing with the whole semester. Like, is there some kind of rule created by God or nature or whatever that would make us happy? I just saw a man of the message. Can everyone hear? Most of you hear me, okay? Well, at the end of class, there will be a recording, so hopefully Lakin's glitching. She can hear it then, okay? So, is there a universal truth, or is this all subjective and cultural? This is another kind of tension point we're going to be looking at throughout the class. I actually have the Bible here in front of me, and I'm looking at the Ten Commandments. Think about something like the Ten Commandments as being an example here. So You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself a graven image. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. Observe the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Honor your father and your mother. You shall not kill, neither shall you commit adultery, neither shall you steal, neither shall you bear false witness against your neighbor, neither shall you covet your neighbor's wife or your neighbor's house, field, or manservant or maidservant or whatever. So these are the 10 rules ascribed by God in the Old Testament. Okay. So beyond just the morality of happiness versus the morality of obligation, another question arises, something like the 10 Commandments. Do we follow them? Are these universal truths? Right? We know that these things cause destruction. We know that they're awful parts of human nature. If we all kind of accept that these are awful things, then that would kind of suggest, okay, maybe morality and ethics is universal. Maybe there's some kind of universal truth we should all kind of reach for. However, this way of thinking is more of a line of like a religious way of doing ethics. Okay. Over the past 30 to 40 years in the field of ethics, there's slowly been a turn to thinking about it from the other way, in the sense that we do these things because our culture, for some reason or other, tells us to. Is it true? Is one culture morally superior over another to say who is right and who is wrong? Is morality and ethics all up to the individual culture that we're living in? Usually, an example given for this, think about, this is awful stuff, okay? But think about in some countries in Africa, they will have, they will actually disfigure the clitoris of a woman, okay, so that she will never feel sexual pleasure ever. It's a way of kind of keeping women in their place, like keep them from wanting to go off and cheat or whatever. Women will never enjoy sex. Sex will just be used for procreation. They do that in some countries in Africa today. Okay. Well, whenever you think of something like that, we raise this question: who are we to say who's morally right or wrong? Right? Maybe I'm guessing that almost everyone in here would say that that's wrong. But the moral relativist would say, who are we to tell them what to do? It's their country, it's their rules. If everybody mostly agrees to those rules, who are we to judge? Communist China, I always like to pick on communist China in my classes. Communist China is probably the most evil government that has ever existed, if you ask me. The people there can't help it. You can't blame the individual person, but the government is awful. Okay. So, for example, the communist China pretty much made it a rule where you can't have any more than 2 children. If somebody who's living there, they come up to their 2-child max, then maybe they get pregnant with a 3rd child, the government mandates that they get an abortion. Okay. If you don't, they'll throw you in prison or kill you for it, because the population over there is so much that they just couldn't sustain all the babies being born. So they set a rule of 2. You have If you push it past that, if a guy doesn't get fixed, or if a woman doesn't get a hysterectomy, get pregnant, you have to get an abortion. Okay? I think most of us would say that's pretty awful. It's pretty awful. But from China's point of view, they have good reasons for doing it. You can only feed so many people. You only have housing for so many people. Keep it at 2. Maybe it won't have to stay at 2 forever, but keep it at 2 for a generation or so. Everything will balance out. The demographics might balance out. So from their perspective, that might be okay. This is another tension point we're going to arrive at. Is there a universal truth? Some things are morally right. Some things are wrong. Some things lead to happiness. Some things usually do not. Or do we kind of fall under the umbrella of it's up to each society to come up with their own rules? One of us thinks our rules is better than the other one. Maybe that's kind of a moral superiority complex that we might be developing. This is a hard one, but we're going to be interrogating this through the whole rest of the semester. What's your guys' sort of initial take at the beginning of the course on this question? Do you think some things are always right or always wrong? Like morality in this case? Or do you think, okay, maybe it isn't right for us to kind of judge other cultures for what they do?
I'm gonna say, I feel like even if something's a law, I do always feel like it's up to the person whether they think that something's going to be morally right or morally wrong. You could have a law like stealing. Some people may see it as right and some people may see it as wrong. I personally don't see that as a good thing, but some person it could be a good thing if it's needed or if it's for the right reason per se. But I do genuinely think it is up to the not individual person, but like group based kind of.
Yeah, so stealing, right? To use your example, maybe you would, maybe if you had no money and you had a kid you were looking after or something, maybe you would go to the grocery store and steal some fruit or something, right?
Yes.
And in that case, the greater good, you might say, would be stealing over following the rules.
Yes.
Okay. You'll remember this, Dakota. We will come back to this very example a few times throughout the course.
Okay.
What about some of the rest of you guys? Is there a whole truth? Some things are right and wrong no matter what. Versus, is it cultural?
I think certain big things always are things that violate human rights, even if a culture defines human rights differently. I think that there's still an objective kind of universally agreed upon thing. I think other things are more open to cultural interpretation, as long as they don't infringe on someone's ability to live.
Yeah, can you give me an example, Jacob, of something that almost all cultures might think is basic human rights?
Killing is bad. That's kind of something that humans throughout centuries have it's sort of a contract that everyone's kind of agreed upon. It's that murder without justification is a bad thing, because you're infringing on someone's right to live, which is something else that we've all kind of collectively thought. Like, not every culture has thought this, but like the majority, and that's a lot more kind of objective than something about like how different cultures say that you should dress, as opposed to like whether or not you should take someone's life.
Good. So you're suggesting then that something like the Ten Commandments is a universal rule that would apply to everyone.
And yeah, because I think that like obviously there's like deviations from it throughout like history, but most cultures throughout history have agreed that there's like, you know, like don't kill without cause, don't steal, don't lie. They're kind of, it's like most of like society is built around kind of those ideas.
Yeah, and then the example I gave two very harrowing examples of how morality depends on culture. But if we think about the communist China making people get abortions, or maiming genitalia in some certain countries in Africa, I think most would say that those are probably some basic human rights violations and things like that. The example I gave you was perhaps comes from my bias, because I tend to be a thinker who thinks there is a right or wrong versus it being cultural. There's probably some bit more nuance that I could do to unpack this. Like Jacob said, something like dress. Like Americans might think it's okay to dress a certain way. Well, let's use Islam as an example here. Okay, think about women in Islam, and not in every Islamic country where actually is this the case, but in some of the more fundamentalist ones, women aren't allowed to show their faces. Okay, yet they have to dress where no skin is showing. Sometimes you can only, in places like Saudi Arabia or Iran, you can only see the eyes, right? It's mostly those are the two more fundamentalist countries. If you go to other ones like Morocco or especially Morocco is more of a open society about how they deal with that. Saudi Arabia, even if you're not a Muslim, if you go there now, you have to, if you're a woman, you have to dress accordingly. Okay. So something like that. This might be a better example to unpack this tension. Would we say, okay, the Saudi Arabians, the way that they handle that is completely barbaric, right? Punish a woman if she shows any physical feature. Versus, would you say, okay, that's their culture, that's what they came up with, that's what they all people in power at least seem to agree on. Who are we to say we do it better in America versus how they do it there? That's probably a better example than the communist China one I gave. Okay. Using this example, what's your guys' hunch on this question? Would we say it's wrong, it's a violation of their dignity and their rights, make them dress this way? Would we say, yeah, it's their rules? Who's to say their rules are better than ours? What's your guys' thoughts on this one? Don't be shy of thinking that you won't be politically correct for saying your opinion. I don't care. Okay. What do you all think?
I kind of think it's wrong. I mean, I feel like the women should be able to pick, but also I'm on the fence because I feel like if you're going to live there, you already know the rules. So, I mean, it's kind of like it is wrong, but if you're going to live there, you know that you have to follow these rules anyways. So I'm kind of like on the fence. I don't know.
Yeah, oftentimes if you're born there or something, it's not easy to get out. That's another thing you got to consider.
That is true. I didn't think about that. Yeah, I don't know. I'm on the fence.
Others of you, what do you think of the example of especially women in Saudi Arabia being forced to dress a certain way?
I definitely think it's wrong because, like you said, a lot of them are born into it and they don't have a way out, and it should be the woman's choice. I kind of agree with Savannah in that way.
So if we're right then to frown on them for doing that.
Yeah, I think so.
Any of you guys disagree with Emily here, thinking it's their country, their rules? Yeah, this is something that I encountered a lot when I was teaching at WVU. WVU had a lot of international students. A lot of them were from predominantly Islamic countries. I would see kind of the nuance and variety. Like if I had a student from Kuwait or something like that, a female student, like they would dress like anybody else. Maybe a little, modesty is a virtue in the Islamic faith, and you would at least see their face, okay? Versus if you had a student from Saudi or a country that's very fundamentalist like them, like you would see them, like you would never see their face. They weren't even allowed to drive a car, okay? Like they had somebody pick them up whenever they had to go somewhere because they weren't allowed to drive either. So maybe it's my own Western bias, but when I saw stuff like that, I thought, doesn't seem right to me. I'm kind of with Emily on this one. Didn't seem right to me. This is something that when you're a diplomat or something like this, you have to deal with these kinds of nuances. It looked like you was going to say something, Anna. It looked like you had something on the tip of your tongue.
I was, but then I couldn't figure out how to make my microphone work, and I sort of forgot my thought. It'll come back in a minute.
Just interrupt me whenever it does. So.
I just remembered it. So, okay. I mean, a lot of women over there, because they were raised with it, they don't think in the same way that we do. We were raised with, you can dress however you want. So it's like our starting point is the same as theirs. Their starting point is, their baseline is that they are going to be fully covered. Here, our baseline is we have the freedom of choice to do whatever. So, I mean, I don't personally agree that they should have to be. However, in this instance, I can't remember who said it. One of you guys said, just because they were born into it and the whole cultural thing, it is what it is. They don't really know anything different unless they came from that starting baseline of having the freedom of choice or not having it. I don't know if I explained that very well.
You did.
I knew where it was going in my head, but
So when you were teaching at WVU and you said you had those that culture like in your classroom, did you ask that same question there, and like what were their insights?
I was always very hesitant to go there when I was there, just because I was, at the time, I was just a graduate assistant mainly. I didn't want to push too many buttons like I do now that I'm a professor. Okay. But I did raise the question a few times. And when I did, I did it in as polite of a way as I could without seeming like I was condescending or something. When I did, they just would not, especially the students. I mean, you can't just be like, look at the one Muslim student in class and be like, what do you think? Okay. But I would kind of gauge the waters, test the waters a little. Most of the time, they just wouldn't go there. Okay. They just wouldn't criticize. I mean, they just wouldn't criticize wherever they came from and their roots for whatever reason. And the men, every time I did it with the men, they would just scoff, right? Like, yeah, that's how it is. The women, especially, never would really go there whenever I would gauge the subject. I did try a few times gently. They would probably say it's Western indoctrination or something, right? That if we tried to turn them to our values versus theirs. So maybe if I was there now teaching, I would feel more inclined to go there, just because I have academic freedom now that I didn't necessarily then. It's something that always bothered me, though. I will admit, it is something that always bothered me.
I didn't want to look rude for talking off in the distance, but my son's best friend, they're from some Middle Eastern country, and I've literally never met her face to face, the mom, just because of her coverings. But he was just telling me that, like, inside of their home, like, he's seen her face to face because of it. So that's kind of interesting, especially because, you know, we're not necessarily used to that again. So for us, it's kind of awkward in a sense, but of course we do what we can to respect their culture.
Yeah, behind the doors of the household, I think that, like, you do see the individual person. Out in public, certainly not.
I was about to say, I do feel like age also plays a big part into it, because I had a few Muslim classmates whenever I was growing up in high school. And I know that they were like very open about their religion, but they wore like normal clothes typically. I know there were a few that like still wore their coverings and like were covered up completely. But the two that I know of for sure, they never wore like any of that. They always wore like normal clothes, but they were still very open about it. So I really do feel like it does play a part into, like, you know, your family and I guess staying around that and staying into the culture. But yeah, they wore normal clothes.
Yeah, you certainly can't generalize the entire faith as being like that.
Yeah.
From my experience, it's mostly seemed to be a nationality thing. Certain countries are more stringent than others.
Yeah, see, I don't know exactly where she was from. I just know they were Muslim.
Yeah, Morocco and the United Arab Emirates and Kuwait. Those are three I can tell you are very, I mean, they're not as liberal about those things as we are in the West, but compared to Saudi and Iran and even Iraq in some places, they are.
Yeah.
This is another tension point in our American politics. Oftentimes we even whenever we're talking about things like basic human rights, we think things like women not being able to drive or having to dress this way kind of goes against their dignity. Like oftentimes we like to talk a big game, but then in the business world, the United States is completely in bed with Saudi Arabia. Okay, like we are. I mean, they're the predominant exporter of oil to us. Okay, so we put those things aside when it comes to business. It seems. This, of course, is something that also informs this whole conflict in the Middle East currently between Israel and Palestine, because the Palestinians have tended to be very fundamentalist in their approach to the faith. I could spend the whole rest of the class talking about that. It's not Israel's. Both sides have a lot of nastiness. That whole conflict's just nasty on both sides. That's my hot take on that one. Okay. It's another thing that theology often debates. Is there a time where we would have a just war? Is certain wars justified compared to others? That's a question for theology and not ethics. So these are some things that are certainly worthwhile to think about at the beginning of a course like this one. And Socrates is who we're going to spend Wednesday talking about, just to kind of give you a sneak peek. Socrates was a guy who just wanted to kind of create this philosophical attitude. We have to question everything. Like what we are doing today, discussing morality, different cultures. If somebody tells you this is a rule, question it. Why is it a rule? Why do we have to do this? You never kind of just take what people tell you for granted. Always question, and if you kind of put it through a process of questioning and then you come up to the answers that you like, great. Socrates is kind of instilling the fact we just kind of go through life blind without questioning anything, just following the rules just for the sake of following the rules. It's not a very fulfilling way to live. Socrates thought true happiness and true fulfillment comes from asking basic questions. What is truth? What is it? What is morality? Is there a universal way of thinking about it? Socrates thought if you didn't do this, you just kind of went through life blind, that was kind of a sad way to live your life. He's the one who started poking around, telling people, just question, put yourself to the test. Whenever you think of ethics and morality, put it to the test. If you question it, think it makes sense in the end of the day, the way it was, awesome. If you don't, maybe you should reevaluate. And you can imagine when he started teaching this stuff, it didn't go well. Okay, it did not go well for the guy. Mostly because when he was operating as a philosopher, Athens had gone from being a democracy to more of like a tyrannical government. You had a guy. You went from having Pericles, who was probably one of the great democratic politicians in ancient Greece, and Creon took over. Creon was very authoritarian. He wanted people to listen to whatever he did, no matter what, not question it. So you get a guy who's poking around, causing people to ask questions, mostly amongst the youth. The charge that they accused Socrates of was corrupting the youth. And corrupting the youth. That's what certain politicians like to say that professors are doing these days, is corrupting the youth. Okay. That's what he was charged with. And what you will read about is his trial. Like, what were they accusing him of in his trial? What was his thoughts on what he's being accused of? What he does in his the document we're going to most focus on is called the Apology. And the Apology, Socrates lays it all out there. What makes a good, fulfilling, happy life? A lot of it is questioning, examining, thinking about your life. Don't take anything for granted. So, what I've given you for Wednesday is the Apology, and I gave you a couple of like little commentaries on Socrates, who he was as a man, the mythology behind him. Socrates did not write any of this stuff about him. Plato, his student, did. There's a whole tension between those two. Maybe they didn't like each other. How is Socrates being represented when he's being talked about in these accounts? Socrates, one of the readings even compares Socrates to Christ, because both of them didn't necessarily write anything down. Both of them became martyrs in some sense. So all kinds of interesting stuff we'll talk about on Wednesday with our first example of an ethical philosopher in Socrates. And I think, let me look at my Moodle shell real quick. After today's lecture, now that you've heard it, there is now a quiz that you can take immediately after class on this stuff we've been discussing. And it goes back to the last class, so technically it's a quiz on last class and this one. So like, what's a morality of happiness? What's a morality of obligation? What are these different branches of philosophy and what do they mean? Ethics, aesthetics, and such. So go back. You have the access to the recordings and the notes. Go back and review those, and then when you do, take that quiz. It's super easy. Okay? If you've been paying attention, it's super easy. So, any last minute questions or thoughts before we conclude?
I haven't got a chance to read what we were supposed to read today, and I was going to do it this evening.
Okay.
Would you say taking notes and really detailing things for what we read, it would be important?
Yeah, just go back and, like, if you feel the need to re-listen to the recording, you can jot some notes down, certainly. I think sometimes whenever you're in class, just kind of following along, going with the conversation, then it's sometimes worth a re-listen just to make sure you digest it, I think.
Right. I got you.
If you ever go back and listen to any of the recordings, I would suggest do it at a time when you're doing something else, like if you're working out at the gym, if you're washing the dishes or cooking or something like that. That's a good time to go back and listen whenever you're working your hands. You can have some, even if you're driving, right? You can listen to it on your radio or something. That would be when I would suggest going back and reviewing some of the stuff. Only thing I can't technically stop you. I'm not making those quizzes proctored. And I would just suggest don't use the AI stuff for it. It's all really common sense stuff. Don't be a brain dead drone in an ethics class, which is about not being a brain dead drone. Okay. So, yeah, that's, again, the morality of obligation versus the morality of happiness. Follow the morality of happiness. Okay. But the quizzes are pretty easy. There's nothing really crazy on them or anything. And I'll try to do my best to get all the recordings up as soon as I can after class. Okay. I'm guessing you fixed your mic, Lakin, considering you asked me a question. So.
I did. I had so much trouble. I was sitting on there. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to miss all this stuff. And I was freaking out. I'm a big overthinker. And so I was like, wigging out over it, but I got it figured out.
How'd you fix it? Just your system settings or something?
I just hit a bunch of buttons. I'm going to be honest. I was just going through testing all these different things. Yeah.
Whatever works. Whatever.
Yeah. It worked. I figured it out.
All right, guys. So the reading is a little thicker for Wednesday, so just keep that in mind. I would most suggest if you're in a bind, read the apology if nothing else. The other stuff I would encourage you to, but read the apology if you're in a bind for time or something. Okay, it's all in PDF form up on our Moodle for you. So see you guys on Wednesday. Take care.
I have a question. Sorry. Will that quiz be open till 11:59?
The one about today's class,
Yes.
I actually leave the one on today's class open for a whole week, so you can go back and review the notes. And I think the first day assignment from last week, I think you should technically get that in by 11:59 today. But the quiz on today's class, you have a whole week for it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.